And to discuss the controversy in the All Progressives Congress, we are now being joined remotely by Oluwole Osaze Uzzi, former INEC Director of Voter Education and Publicity. He's in Benin. And a RISE analyst, Mahmud Jega. Gentlemen, very warm welcome to Newsnight. I think I should just start with Wole Uzzi, who's been there with INEC for several decades, before retiring. What does this portend for the APC not holding its convention? Does it contravene any part of INEC rules and regulations? Wole?
Well, good evening and thank you for having me. Well, it's not a question of contravening INEC rules and regulations. The Constitution of the land, 1999 Constitution, as amended, requires there to be an elected in its constitution must spell out a mode for election, periodic election. So the APC is no exception. Everybody is bound by the constitutional provisions. And the periodic election has been defined by the constitution to say at least every 4 years you must have a convention to elect the governing council of the body. So if they have run out of that 4-year period, then there's a problem. And the Constitution of the land does not envisage a situation where a caretaker committee and an elected committee continues to govern or rule a party for an indeterminable and indefinite length of time. So not only is it contrary to the INEC guidelines, it is contrary to the Constitution if they continue to do this and elongate the tenure of an unelected caretaker committee. So I think we have that in mind. And the Constitution of the land is the most superior piece of legislation you can have in the country today.
Let me stay with you very quickly, Wole, if I may. What kind of problems really lay in front of the APC failure to hold this convention?
Well, the INEC regulations requires, for example, that during elections is the national chairman and national secretary who should sign the nomination forms for the candidates. And it's also the National Executive Committee that should organize a congresses and conventions to select candidates for elections. We are still a year away from such. But if you recall that the provisions of the electoral bill that was not assented to by the president actually requires INEC to give notice of election 1 year to the time. If that law becomes law, then they are walking a very tight rope. You saw what happened in Zamfara 3 years ago. You saw what happened in River State. Any party that does not comply with the provisions of the Electoral Act as it relates to democratically organizing a Congress or convention to select candidates runs the risk of not having any candidate for the election. It has not happened in the presidential election yet, but it could happen. And any of the parties, be it APC, PDP, or any other party that does not comply with the regulations, both in the Electoral Act and Constitution, runs that risk of not having any candidates.
Well, let me ask another follow-up question, because we have two off-season elections in our hands in Osun and Ekiti State. What would be their fate in this instance?
Well, in as long as the caretaker committee has some kind of legitimacy, I'm aware that it's been challenged in court because the chairman of the caretaker committee, for example, is not the APC constitution says nobody who holds an executive position of governor can double or can hold a party position. So there's a risk there. But if it's accepted de facto and de jure, in fact and in law that the present committee has constituted, if they organize congresses and candidates are selected, then those ones have to be accepted by the commission. But anybody who's aggrieved, who's participated or is entitled to participate, may go to court to challenge the legitimacy and legality of all actions being undertaken by the caretaker committee. And I'm aware that there are several cases in court, so I don't want to comment on whether it's valid or it's not valid, whether they are properly considered or not. All I can tell you is that in as much as the previous committee had not run its 4 years, then they run a big risk where the legitimacy of the, as your report said, where the legitimacy of the caretaker committee is called to question or pronounced upon by a competent court of law.
All right, let's quickly bring in Mahmud Jega. Arise News analyst, sitting with us right here in the studio. Mahmoud, you heard what Wale said there, the implications of not holding that convention. That's been billed, well, presumably for February. What do you think it will be? Will it be the death knell of the APC, like some have said?
Well, certainly the party is facing very serious problems because this inability to fix a date for a convention. They said February, and it is almost mid-January already, and no specific date has been fixed. And the problem, I think the most serious one, is the crisis in several state chapters, because if you are going to have a convention, you will have to say, determine who the delegates will be from various states. And there are between 6 and 8 states that have a serious crisis of legitimacy. Now, I don't see how, although there is a reconciliation committee on the ground going around trying to reconcile, but in some states, the differences have really grown so wide, and there are parallel state offices. I don't know whether they will be able to resolve those problems in time to have a hitch-free convention in February. They are really working on a very tight rope now.
Well, a tightrope indeed. Let's take some messages, and we'll be back again and continue the interrogation of the All Progressives Congress holding its national convention in February or not holding it. Uncertainties still beclouds the whole situation. Stay with us.
Right, glad you could stay with us. You're still watching Newsnight, coming to you live from the nation's capital, Abuja. Our guests, Mahmud Jega, Rise News analyst, and Wole Uzzi, former INEC director, voter education. Let me stay with you very quickly. Mahmoud, you made a comment earlier that indeed APC is walking a tightrope. But let's talk about some insinuations going around that the Maimala Buni-led APC, NWC, and maybe even the Attorney General may be in cahoots trying to ensure that this convention does not hold in order to continue to hold on to the chairmanship of the party. And then they're looking for a consensus candidate. What do you make of all of this?
Well, that allegation was made by some people within the party. But I don't know whether it has a basis in truth, because there are serious reasons, as far as I can see, why they are having trouble fixing a date. Maimala Buni is a state governor, and he knows legally he cannot become party chairman, for example, except in this caretaker.
Some even say he wants to be VP.
Well, that will be next year if he wants to be VP. But the important thing now is to conclude this process and hand over to an elected executive. I think the main problem really has to do with the messy state congresses that APC had last year, which led to parallel congresses in several states that produced different executives. And in many states now there are 2 party offices, one here and there, and they are in court, many of them trying to find out which is the legitimate faction. So if you go ahead and hold the convention, and then one faction later on wins a court case, then it calls into question the convention itself. So the best solution is to try to reach amicable solutions if they can.
In reaching amicable solution, I'm still staying with you, Mahmoud, is the interest of the governors here. The governors are even divided, and that seems to be the hotbeds that the party is really sitting on now, just like sitting on a keg of gunpowder. What do you think this portends for the APC?
Well, the issue is, as far as we can see, in all the states where there was a contest between some factions backed by an APC governor and another faction backed either by a former governor or by a minister or by some other party chieftain, senator or anything, the National Caretaker Committee tends to legalize the faction that has the backing of the state governor in most cases, like in Kwara, in Oshun. But in Kano, it looks like the case is a bit different. There is a faction loyal to the governor and another faction loyal to Senator Ibrahim Shekarau. and it looks like the Shekarau faction is having the upper hand now legally. But each of those factions is very powerful, and apart from the legal implications, there are the political implications also, because if you don't solve the problem, those factions will walk out and probably go to opposition or somewhere, and that could spell problem for the party in the election. So all this is the tightrope that the caretaker committee is working right now.
All right, Wole Uzzi, a few days ago, the INEC chairman Mahmud Yakubu actually said he had not received any notification of a convention, a congress, meeting, or of any kind from the APC. How much time does the party have?
Well, by virtue of the provisions of Electoral Act, they're required to give a minimum of 21 days notice. So whether it's February, they appear to still be within time. Probably the second half of February, they will still be within time, as long as they give that notice at least 21 days before the convention.
And if it doesn't hold in February, what then? Because it's looking more and more likely that it may not hold in February.
Well, regardless of the time it holds, as long as they give
21 days.
At least, the longer the period, the better in that sense for them.
Okay, let me stay with you. There's been this lack of clarity about the electoral amendment bill before the National Assembly. Would you say it is dead on arrival? Is this, something that is already jading the APC and its organization of its national convention? What role does the electoral amendment bill return to the National Assembly got to do with this?
Well, I cannot comment on the political angle to it all. All I can say as a lawyer is that the bill is technically not dead. It is the president has given reasons why he withheld his assent, and a couple of choices back to the National Assembly. They can look at those reasons given by the president and agree with him and send it back, do the needful and send it back, or they can attempt to override his assent, in which case 2/3 of the members of the National Assembly will vote to override the president's assent. So that bill, as is, becomes the law of the land. They will repass the bill again as long as it enjoys a 2/3 majority in both houses. Then it becomes the law of the land. So it's certainly is not dead. Our hope is that the National Assembly will reconvene quickly and quickly attend to that issue, so that there's certainty in the legal framework for the conduct of the 2023 elections. There are many timelines that we are running short of those timelines now, so we hope that they'll quickly look at it. Fortunately, the timelines were not controversial in the sense that they were not part of what was touched upon by the president in his explanation of reasons for withholding his assent. So those things are not too controversial.
All right, Mahmud Jega, let's talk the politics of all of this, since Wole Uzzi, of course, is not in a position to do that. Let's talk about that meeting between the president and the governors that didn't hold on Sunday. It was pushed to Wednesday. Today still has not held. What signals are you getting from that? And maybe you want to speak to the issue of the Electoral Amendment Act bill that's not been signed, and how it will play out in all of this within the APC.
Well, the contentious aspect of the electoral bill has to do with the organization of party primaries to nominate candidates. So we have not arrived at that stage yet. That one will come into play later in the year, whether the parties will do that by direct primaries or they have other options like indirect primaries or even consensus. What exactly has led to the stalemate among the governors is not very clear. The president apparently asked the APC governors to go and reach a certain consensus about the date of the convention. They have not been able to do that. It may not be because of division among their ranks. It may be for the same reasons. How do you solve these problems of division in many states before you can actually fix a date? That may be the reason. But because they have not spoken and have not said what is the reason, then the media is speculating that there is sharp division among the governors. I don't know whether that is true.
Well, the president was meant, or well, expected to, you know, fix a date for the convention at that meeting. And the question, of course, was why, you know, what signals you're getting. But we'll have to leave it there. Oluwole Uzzi, former INEC Director of Voter Education and Publicity, Mahmud Jega, Rise News Analyst. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining us on News Night.